Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Rant. I think it's Wednesday. It might be Monday or Tuesday. I don't know. I need a haircut. This is getting out of control. I'm looking at my hair in this video and I'm like, ugh. What do I want to talk about today? Well, today I want to say I'm growing weary of well-doing. And here's what I mean. The population at large continues to complain about the United States of America. Now, I came here at a very young age, 5th, 6th grade, and had to learn English. My friends called me the yes-no boy. How do I remember? Because all I could say was yes and no. Now, these individuals continue to complain, and it's perpetrated. It's perpetrated. You can tell this is unedited because I don't care. Make fun of me. I learned English as a second language. That's always my excuse. What's yours? So the media perpetuates these things. Social media, right? We all get online and we're like, oh, it's so-and-so's fault and so-and-so's fault and so-and-so's fault. And I'm probably one of 100 people in the world that actually know whose fault it really is. That being the perpetuation of the coronavirus, not the coronavirus itself. Now, I think sometimes that people didn't have to take a history class. We forget how great this country is. We forget that we created most of the wealth of the world. We forget that things like the internet, cell phones were created here. Technology, mostly created here. I mean, the founding companies like Intel, this was created here in the United States. It wasn't created anywhere else. Then you have people complaining and saying, oh, the country's falling apart. It's this political leader's fault. It's that political leader's fault. Well, it's not a politician's fault. It's not a politician's fault that you didn't pay attention. It's not a politician's fault that you abdicated your relationship with healthcare to an insurance company. That's on you. So I think a lot of times we forget to be introspective and look at ourselves first. This country has become a country of victims and blamers. Nothing is their fault. If the internet goes out, they yell at Cox Cable or they yell at Comcast and screw you and da-da-da-da. Like the person on the other end even has any control over what your cable looks like or your internet. Is it frustrating? Sure. Our internet's slow as can be because everybody's on it, obviously. But what is the truth about America? America is the greatest country in the world. How do I know? I've been to most. So, I mean, it's an opinion, but it's mine and it's a valid opinion versus 90% of people who've never been anywhere. You're like, hey, have you ever left New York City? No. I've lived in Brooklyn my whole life. Or I lived in Berkeley my whole life. Or I lived outside of Dallas, Texas my whole life. That's the big city. Right? Like you haven't been to Rome. You haven't been to Geneva. You haven't been to Tokyo. You haven't been to Moscow. You haven't been to Joburg. You haven't been to Sydney. You haven't been to wherever. There's thousands of wonderful places and most people have never been there, yet they have an opinion and pontificate about how the world is at large. It's really quite sad. Now, so that's what I'm kind of upset about. I'm kind of upset that people continue to complain about America, yet we kick the living daylights out of the measles, out of polio. We kicked the daylights out of smallpox. Yes, was it difficult? Was it around for a couple of years? Yes. Did we learn to deal with it? Yes. After 9/11, we worked through that. Now, we're not over it yet. Obviously, you can see because Congress doesn't pay much money for the victims. But you can see we're getting over it. We got over all the hurricanes, created mass devastation, but people are getting over it. In the next 2 years, we'll get over this too. We'll be over this hurdle. And then we'll be back to where we came from. We'll be a changed people, but we'll be back. And the thing is, what we can't forget is how great this country is. We can't forget that most of the entrepreneurs come from here. We can't forget that we have more ingenuity in this country than practically the entire globe. That's the thing that people don't understand. And I, as an immigrant, I'm like befuddled about it. I'm like, I don't understand how you can be this stupid. But maybe it's not stupidity. Maybe it's naivete. Maybe it's I don't know. I certainly have my own opinion, but I don't know, which is a struggle. Now, on to the good news of the day. Dr. Dixit, a neurosurgeon out of Huntsville, posted a LinkedIn article this morning about Dr. Brian Levy. He is the former CEO of Radio Shack, who came back after he retired and went to medical school and became an ER doc. And guess what? He's working his ass off on the front lines in Toronto, helping COVID-19 patients get better. It's pretty remarkable that someone who could be that successful with Radio Shack, one of Buffett's primary holdings in the 80s, could be that successful yet again. There's some of you who are sitting on the sidelines saying, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? I don't know what you can do, but you can be the best of who you are. You can stay home. You can stay 6 to 10 feet away from people. You can not be a jerk. You can help your neighbor. You can feed the poor. You can do a lot of things. But don't violate the basic rules of what the government has asked us to do. Don't be near people. Don't be outside acting crazy. All right. So we covered Brian Levy. What a tremendous individual. And you know, you can't say enough good things about people who bring a positive to the world, especially when it's hurting like it is today. The other article I liked was by Doug Aldean, and I forget which specific article it is because he's always got great articles on LinkedIn about what hospitals are doing. He had one about a Wisconsin hospital that continues to surprise bill patients. There's nothing that I despise more than these health systems who are run by bean counters and by bankers and financiers who continue to stomp and trample over the average man. And they'll say things like, well, he agreed to it in a contract. No. Well, if you put it in regular writing, he probably wouldn't have signed it. But you put it in legalese and you make it this big and no one reads it, no one signs it. And if anyone says otherwise, because contract law is old as can be, well, I mean, who read their Apple user agreement? Well, there'll be one nerd that stands up and says they read it. But I really don't know. That's not true. I know one person, a privacy attorney. He probably read his. But I don't know anybody else. Doug Aldean, Dr. Dixit, two great people to follow. Eric Brickner had a great video on board spots at hospitals and health systems being occupied by nurses and physicians. If you missed the video, I encourage you to follow Dr. Brickner and catch that video. I'm not really trying to tell people who to follow or not to follow. I don't care what you do. I'm just saying these are three great pieces of content. I know I'll get an email later that says, oh, but Dutch, you said so-and-so was great. Well, I think everybody's great. All right. Now, for my private practice physicians, there are several large lobbyists working on your behalf to get you direct access to the Fed window. What is the Fed window? The Fed window is open to the largest banks in the world, i.e. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, B of A, and a couple of others. You'd have to be a banking professional to know who they are. I am not a banking professional whatsoever. I know nothing. What I do know is that the Fed window is open to these banks and that we're the greatest country in the world and that nothing is too complicated for us and that deploying $350 billion has been a little complicated because we're trying to do it in a week. However, it won't be enough. The private practice physicians, including primary care who are not seeing any patients because they don't want them in their office and because it's dangerous, all the way to PT, all the way to surgery on the elective sides that are not being done, people are losing a lot of money. How do we solve that problem? We give them direct access to the window. Like, why does anyone need to go through the banks to get this money? Why can't the bank just give them the money directly? I'm sure lots of finance people will say, well, that's kind of like We'll see. I think you got to put your license up. You got to put up your financials, upload them, and that's it. Done. We need private practice physicians to help fix the problems we're having in the United States. Hospitals and health systems will not help us get there. Most physicians that work at hospitals and health systems are employees of the health system. They don't have a voice. They can't. They have $300,000 in school loans. So if they speak up and say to the bean counter, hey, screw you, or hey, you're doing this wrong, they get fired. And you've seen plenty of cases of it. They are fired. You follow the Zog. He had a great story about it the other day. If you're a doctor and you work for a health system, whether it's Kaiser, whether it's Beaumont, the guys out of Detroit that just basically threatened everyone, Banner Health, NYU Langone, it doesn't matter. You can't speak up. So the employed doctors don't have a voice anymore. So we have to go to private practice. Private practice is one of the most essential items we have in the country to take care of people, and we're bankrupting the industry. And if we bankrupt private practice doc business, then healthcare is gone forever. Because the hospitals and health systems were not prepared for this. They didn't even have an idea or an inkling to be prepared because they're not physician-owned. And so, what are we going to do? We have to get cash, we have to get financing to them directly, and it cannot be through financiers and banks taking their cut, taking their piece of the business. It's got to be done directly. Rojas out.